Let's discuss this further now. We're joined by Trevor Shaku, spokesperson of the South African Federation of Trade Unions. Thank you so much for your time, Trevor. Let's now talk about the expanded public works program. It is 20 years old, and today, of course, as we've seen, the president launching what he calls a stage or phase 5 of this program. How would you describe the past 20 years?
Thanks for having us. Look, the EPWP has actually, in our view, brought some changes in the people's lives, but also in our communities, because its inception, its conceptual objectives from the onset has always been that the EPWP should at least try to be one measure in which we are able to fight unemployment. So it was creating employment opportunities, but at the same time, to achieve social protection. So it's a measure through which people can be able to earn some income and be able to live, especially in the context of high unemployment. But also, it was to contribute to the provision of assets and services. And such particular changes we've seen in our communities where they've contributed to cleaning of our streets, to ensuring that infrastructure is repaired in our communities, to ensuring that they render some services in our hospitals and clinics, in schools, whenever there are problems of cleanliness and others, they would, of course, invite EPWP workers to run the services there. So quite through, it is clear that quite the program has actually contributed to these areas for which it was initially conceptualized. The problem, of course, might be whether we were able to win the maximum, or rather get maximum results in those particular areas. But secondly, one area which, as the South African Federation of Trade Unions and our trade union affiliate, which is organizing in the EPWP sector, NUPSO, have actually been putting forward, and that is ensuring that the employment creation in these particular projects ought to be sustainable and provide the security of tenure for these particular workers. In other words, absorption of these workers into public service facilities, in public service departments and public sector departments, so to ensure that their jobs are secure, but also they are provided not just short-term relief, but long-term relief, especially if you consider that most of these contracts are merely given to these workers for a period of a year, and then there will be extension by a year. But quite often, even with those who have had the extensions for more than 10 to 15 years, and a reasonable expectation was created to give these people employment, the departments which have been employing and utilizing the skills and the labor power of these workers has actually not taken them forward to ensure that it absorbs them permanently into its own worker role.
Trevor, let's then talk about that short-termism approach, if you will. I mean, there are concerns, as you rightfully put it, that yes, there are successes, but should the EPW programs not only speak to job opportunities, but sustainable, permanent jobs, like you rightfully say? And then what would the recourse then be? Where would this phase 5 take us, or what should at least government implement to make sure that there is this long-term approach to, creating these jobs, especially if you consider that some unions, unlike yourselves, are saying that some of these workers are being exploited?
Look, indeed, we have continuously said they are being exploited. In fact, in a number of departments, what we've experienced is, one, the reduction in the public service headcount had actually been utilized by some managers in these departments to fill in some of those posts or to do the work which was done by the people who positions or posts have been closed through natural attrition, using these particular workers, the EPWP workers, to fill and do some of that particular work, because the workload in the public service has actually piled as a result of the greater population growth, which has expanded demand for public services. But the reduction in the headcount in the public service has meant that there's shortage of staff. So the greater part of the work, which ought to be done by workers in substantive funded posts, has actually been given to the EPWP workers. So this is the form of exploitation, because you find that an EPWP worker is doing a work that ought to be done by a worker employed either at level 5 or level 6 of the pay scale of government. But because through natural attrition, government has closed such particular posts, it utilizes the EPWP. So that is the one dimension of the exploitation that the EPWP workers are facing. But what we have also, and I think we need to emphasize, what we have also put forward over the years through NUPSO and ourselves as a federation, is that the EPWP workers ought to be absorbed permanently. We have launched too many strikes and protests in various provinces. I mean, on Monday, we were in Pietermaritzburg, where we're demanding that the provincial, the premier, the provincial office of government ought to facilitate the permanent employment of those workers, not only the EPWP, of course, but the community health care workers, because these are the sections of workers who are precarious and have no security of tenure in terms of their employment. But secondly, who are continued to be exploited because they are paid lesser remuneration. I mean, if you look at the national minimum wage, the EPWP worker rate is far less than what a household grocery costs on a monthly basis. In fact, so these are the issues that we are faced with.
Yeah, in fact, that salary has been described as basically for transportation and food. I mean, it is a good initiative, as you said, in terms of just upskilling, particularly from that front. But when we talk about absorption, especially in as far as the youth is concerned, I mean, I was listening to the president saying that this program really is about changing individual lives, but also ultimately community lives. So when we look at then the salaries, it almost does not seem feasible for these young people, presumably, to go back and then make a change in their communities, you know, just given the small scale of salary. But then the other question then would be, in as far as absorption is concerned, where will the funding come from? I mean, the economy of this country is hardly growing.
Thank you very much for this question, because our contention in the political economic space where we have been debating this question, we have continuously insisted that the EPWP ought to be recognized as a form of a jobs guarantee scheme. Now, as a form of a jobs guarantee scheme, it has to be factored into the macroeconomic framework of this country. In other words, it has to be funded through fiscal expenditure. And that, in our view, will lead to the broader strategy of multiplying the income created through the EPWPs, which, in our view, will have ripple effects in the economy, what we call fiscal multiplier. Because if you indeed go on, absorb these workers, give them a decent wage, you will be creating a pool of people who are willing to buy. In other words, will be increasing what we call aggregate demand. In increasing aggregate demand, you'll be resolving the issues of the problems of the producers who currently are uncertain of whether whatever they will produce will be bought. If you look at the manufacturing underutilization in this country, is sitting at 21.75%. And the contributing factor to that is the demand side. Demand has declined by 10% over the years. Why has it declined? It's because the share of national income that goes to consumers or households, who are, of course, users or consumers in the final analysis, has declined considerably, with the inequality disparities growing, where the concentration of wealth is kept in the hands of the few and the overwhelming majority do not have. And this overwhelming majority are the consumers. In other words, by not giving these workers enough money and creating employment so that there is income for the households, you are actually killing aggregate demand. And this is reflected in the statistic publication that I've referred to. So in other words, to resuscitate and stimulate the economy, you need first and foremost to deal with the demand side. So the
Yeah.
economy is not going to grow. Make no mistake, it's not going to grow unless you incentivize the producers. And the only way to incentivize the producers is to ensure that there is increase in aggregate demand, and therefore the producers are assured that there will be a market.
All
And
right,
therefore
Trevor.
they will be incentivized to expand production. And that, in our view, will
Yeah.
help deal with the problem of the debt to GDP ratio, which has widened, closing it, but at the same time resolving the issues of growth.